Stillman Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical Studios on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. Ian is here today. Hello, Ian.
What up, what up?
How about that guarantee last night?
Got one.
I mean, I tell you, I guaranteed the Predators were going to lose, and even I was surprised. I mean, I expected it to be a close game and that team was going to play hard for Hines, and that team did play hard for Hines, and dang. I was thinking it was like that was halfway between damn and dang. Damn. I mean, that one, we were spot on with the guarantee. But expected it, so it's no end of the world one way or another. So, I want to start with this on this Fireball Hot Take Friday ahead of this incredibly fascinating and meaningful game against the Colts on Sunday. So I was listening to Robbie and Joe after I was on earlier this morning and got Joe all worked up. And then I was listening to TD when he was on there. And I was reading the text line. And there's a sentiment that I hear. Now, I don't see it in any of your actions. I mean, right now, Stillman and Company is the most popular it has ever been. I see all your numbers and data and info and everything else. And apparently you guys are enjoying the days of our Titans, as I like to call it. But I heard this sentiment that was, oh my goodness, can we please talk about something else other than did the GM say this and tell it to this person? Did the coach say this and tell it to that person? Was it ownership here? Was it this there? Was it? I'm tired of it too. I am. And I am sure the Titans are sick and tired of every day it being another story here or there, or another report out of there that could have been this guy, or it could have been that guy, I'm sure they're tired of it too. But let me tell you something about the Titans. Instead of worrying about the situation we find ourselves in right now, this idea of, oh my goodness, make it stop. I heard people were texting into the morning show, and they were saying, let's talk more basketball. Trust me, if we talked basketball in November in Nashville, Tennessee, we wouldn't have any listeners. We're not talking basketball. It's not our fault that the Titans are a disaster. Guess whose fault it is? And this is what the Titans need to understand. And I'm going to explain this because it's not just as simple as, well, if the Titans were good, this wouldn't be a problem. But it is the Titans' fault that the day-to-day has turned into As the World Turns, or The Young and the Restless, or General Hospital. It is absolutely their fault. For starters, nobody trusts anything anymore from the Titans because the Titans give us no reason to trust them. They gave John Robinson a contract extension, and they fired him less than a year later out of nowhere. That was a huge damaging of trust moment for everybody to look at the higher-ups of the Tennessee Titans to make us think that they know what they're doing or that they're being honest with us, right? When you have a press release that you've signed your general manager to an extension and you say, we believe in Rand and Mike for years we believe in Mike and John for years to come, and then 8 months later you fire John, it's like, well, can we really trust what you say? And because of the overtures of people I've said say that they're committed to Vrabel and Vrabel's their coach going forward, Diana, that as much as that comes out, don't we always have to remember whether or not the Titans have told us the truth before? Oh, yeah. Mike Mularkey was the coach. They won a playoff game. Mularkey addressed the lack of trust that he had in his own organization at the press conference after the game was over. The Titans released a statement the next day saying he was the coach going forward, and a week later fired him. So when it comes, I heard TD say today that he feels like he's in high school listening to all of this on a daily basis. And I get it. But don't blame me for that. Don't blame Joe for that. Don't blame Robbie for that. Don't blame any of us for that. Blame you because you caused it, because you can't be trusted. Not only did they fire the general manager right after they gave him a contract extension, we don't even know who's in charge of the football team. So when one guy gets up there and says, hey, we have to trade Kevin Byard because it's in the best interest of the team, all of us are sitting there saying, well, do you actually believe that? Or did the other guy make you do that? Or did you want to do it and did the other guy not want to do it? And then the people that are in charge of the Titans never talk anyways, and the one time or two times that they do, normally they're lying. So I hear, this is coming from New England, and it's New England's fault, and it's, no. This drama-filled mess is your fault. You've caused it. The 4-7 team that you have right now, it's your fault. You've caused it. Don't worry about anybody else. Don't worry, well, this person said this. I had somebody tweet me before I came on the show today that says, you hate the Titans. Let me tell you something. When I was 11 years old, I went to the Super Bowl. I might have been 10. I think I was 11. I went to the Super Bowl. They lost by 1 yard in the Georgia Dome. I cried. The next year, they were 13-3. They lost to the Ravens at home. I took the next day off of school. I was 10, 11 years old then. 2 years ago, I stood there, 3 of my friends at the Bengals game. I watched the kick go through the uprights, and instead of saying, all right, guys, see ya, I just walked out. When Ryan Tannehill opened the divisional round of the playoffs by throwing an interception, I turned around and kicked the chair. So don't tell me I hate the Titans. But when I say this is their fault, it's not just their fault because of their lack of general football skills in terms of putting the organization in place for us to have any faith. I say it's their fault even more so than their, I think, resume of distrust that we should have in them right now. I got to be honest with you. A couple years ago, I had caught wind last year. I had heard, and this is going to sound kind of Greg Bedard of me, but that's okay. I had just heard from somebody who has some serious ties in the NFL that told me they thought that the Titans were going to build this stadium and then sell the team. And Chad Withrow, I think, heard the same thing I heard, and he came on in March, and he said it, and whatever. And of all the things I've said that I feel like have probably pissed them off, that one might have been the number one thing. And I got sent a letter that they sent to the mayor, and it basically said, we promise that we have no interest in selling the team. And I believe that, but again, can I really trust the Titans? I mean, they sent a letter out saying Mularkey was the coach, and he wasn't. If you lie about one thing, then why am I not going to assume that you might be lying about the second thing? But then there's the other part of this where it's also their fault. They put together a terrible offensive line. Now, whether it's the owner's fault because they didn't give them enough money, whether it's the talent evaluation fault for giving Andre Dillard and Aaron Brewer the little bit money that they did give you to spend, or whether it's Vrabel's inexperienced offensive line coach and his inability to go out and get a good offensive line coach, whether it's that is at fault. And honestly, it's probably a combination of the three. The line is terrible and has probably cost you 2 to 3 football games this year. Off the top of my head, I would argue the offensive line absolutely cost you the New Orleans game, and it absolutely cost you the Pittsburgh game. So those are 2 games right there against 2 average teams that we all know you could have won, and if you had a better offensive line, you probably would have. Well, if you win those 2 games, you're 6-5. You're not 4-7 anymore, you're 6-5. If you're 6-5, you are battling for the last wild card spot with Indianapolis, Houston, and Denver. You think this Friday before the Colts game, we'd be sitting around talking about who's really in charge? Does the GM hate the coach? Does the coach hate the GM? Or do you think we'd be talking about Jonathan Taylor's out this week, and if they give the ball to Jonathan, and if they run the ball with Zach Moss, they're going to need the linebackers to get up. What do you think we'd be doing? What do you think you'd be doing around the water cooler at work? What do you think you'd be doing when talking to your kids or your brother or your mother or your family, whatever? But you're not. You're 4-7. You're out. You can win this week, and it won't. I mean, it'll be nice to see the quarterback play well, but it's not going to change anything. You're not at the playoffs. And so stop acting like the Titans are blameless with the situation they find themselves in. I hear Derek yelling and screaming, and I agree with him when it comes to, well, Mike Vrabel has always been good with bad rosters. Well, then why is he bad with a bad roster? I don't believe that, by the way. Mike Mularkey got fired supposedly because he was holding a good roster back. But this idea that the Titans are victims, and again, Carthon got thrown under the bus by Greg Bedard. That is absolutely true. But the idea that the Titans aren't causing their own problems is ridiculous. The idea that the people that are still with the Titans are not actively causing these problems is ridiculous. I know. I bet you in there where they have what I believe is a culture of toxic positivity, I bet you everybody there just thinks John Robinson sucks and they'll be fine. I don't buy that. So let's not act like it's me or the media or the Patriots. Let's not act like we're the root of the problems. It's the Titans. And the longer this is going to last, the more people are going to talk. So instead of blaming others, instead of thinking that there's some sort of mission to get you, let's figure out how to run a competent football organization. And let's rebuild some of this trust. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. If you want to weigh in on this, I did hear TD say it's like high school, and I did laugh about that. So, coming up next, I have a question for all of you out there. There is something that happened yesterday that a lot of people took note of, that people have said, what do you think about this, Jared? And I'm going to ask you this question. Do you want me to tell you what I really think about something that happened yesterday, or, and I guarantee you if I do this, it's going to piss some people off, or do you want me to try and just make everybody happy? Do you want me to tell you what I really think, or do you want me to play nice? You pick. 615-737-1025. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. 615-737-1025. 1025, 106 for the game.
I'll say this, though.
Right?
And look, maybe, and again, this is all they let us see, right? So I'm talking about all they let us see. But during training camp, we saw a lot, right? Now we see, 20 minutes, 2 days a week, and a stretch on Friday. Mike Vrabel and John Robinson used to stand together for sometimes significant segments of stuff and have conversations during early parts of practice or at the end of practice to get on the same page or whatever. During those windows, either during practice or after practice concluded before Mike came to talk to us on a Friday or whatever. I don't see Mike and Rand together hardly ever in the windows that we're allowed. Now, does that mean that they just have a different structure and they talk afterwards inside? I'm sure they talk. But in terms of what we see,
It'd be good if they did.
Well, that would be.
you know what I'm saying?
be a
though?
lot cooler if they did.
In terms of what we see, I don't see that.
PK on Robbie and Joe Wednesday. Talking about I don't ever see Rand and Mike together at practice the way I used to see Mike and John. The text line, by the way, has spoken. They have said they want to hear what I think. And I'm just going to tell you, this is going to make people mad. Okay? Ian, did you see the video from practice yesterday?
Yes, I did.
So Paul on Wednesday says on Robbie and Joe, I don't even see them together on the practice field. And then on Thursday, there's Mike standing next to Rand. They're laughing, they're joking, they're chuckling, they might as well have been pinching each other on the ass in that video yesterday. I could be 100% wrong about this. There's no way to know what's in somebody's heart. But I believe that was for show. I believe that the hand-holding and the chuckling and the we're fine between Vrabel and Carthon for the only open portion of practice immediately a day after Paul criticizes it was a total middle finger to all of the drama and the gossip and, quite frankly, that particular gossip that we just played right there. I could be totally wrong about it. But again, I'm just telling you what I think. Now, what I will say for them is this, in regards to the hand-holding and the butt pinching and everything else. It really is a no-win for Rand and Mike in that instance. Now, I'm not saying Paul's at fault. Paul is making an observation off of what he's seen. And you know that when I think Paul is at fault, we'll let you know that. But it really is hard because if they don't interact with one another, then it's kind of like they don't interact with each other. They hate each other, right? But then when they do interact with each other, it's like, look at them. They're interacting because they're trying to prove that they don't hate each other. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's kind of unfair because it's almost like I don't think that they can win either way in that. Like, once Paul says it, he says it. And if they don't stand together, then it's like, well, they're still not standing together. And if they do stand together, it's like, oh, are you doing it because Paul told you to? But if you want this doctor's honest medical opinion and not just affirmation for what you want to believe, I think that video where they're chuckling it up during the open portion of practice is absolutely in response to Paul. And if that's the case, like, I don't know what to make of that, right? Like, is it, man, are you guys listening to the drama and the gossip and the noise and are you guys listening to it that much? Like, do you have the radio on in the office? And it's like, oh, here comes Paul at 8 o'clock on Wednesday. Turn on Paul. Actually, we need to get to this scouting discussion that we're having right now on wide receivers in the draft. That'll have to wait until 9 o'clock. And then maybe even then we'll have to push it to 9:30 because we'll see how Chase and Big Joe react to what Paul has to say. Turn it on. Turn it on. I see that a lot. I've seen it a ton in sports. You want to know when I most see it? I most see it when somebody's in some heat. Robbie and I were talking about this yesterday. I'm not going to name names, but boy, would I love to. Apparently, the Twitter live function used to be Periscope. I guess you can't do this anymore. I didn't even know you could do this. But apparently Robbie said he could pull it up and he could see who was in there. And, like, there were coaches, there were players, there were not just the Titans, not just the Predators, not just there were people that were listening, that were popping in there, wanting to know what was being said. And if you were in their shoes, you'd do the same thing. But where you'd really be addicted to it is when things are bad and you know you're getting talked about every day. Like I said, I could be 100% wrong. And you could talk to the next doctor, and the next doctor with a second opinion, the next doctor could just roll their eyes and say, that's nothing. Vrabel and Carthon, they're doing their jobs, Jared, or doctor, whatever. They're doing their job. The second doctor may have a difference of opinion. I don't know. I just tell you what I think, and I know people are going to get mad. They're going to say, here you are. You're trying to cause problems again. And I'm like, don't you just find it a little suspicious that Paul has a very direct criticism of the relationship of Mike and Rand, which, again, the relationship between Mike and Rand has been discussed for a long time. Really, ever since the beginning, but especially ever since that Will Levis, Ian Rappaport, Atlanta Falcon exchange. And now, after Paul's incredibly specific criticism, the next day they're doing the exact thing that Paul said they weren't doing? It seemed pretty coordinated to me. 615-737-1025. Our phone line is driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. 615-737-1025. Adam in Portland is going to kick us off today. Adam, thank you for waiting. Go ahead.
Hey, there's a couple things. So, number one, I don't believe, and I know you kind of led with I don't believe that good football teams are going through this in their town right now. I don't think they're going, what's the drama inside our building? Because it's not important. Like, it's important winning football games. That's why they're hired, is to put stuff in place to help us win football games, because we pay a lot of money to go watch football games. And so I can see it being sloppy, dude. I don't know. I know you said that you think Rand needs to be one and done. I don't put it on him. I put it on Vrabel. I put it on our ownership. I put all this sloppiness on those guys. But, man, I don't know why people are trying to roll around. I feel like everything's so in flux. Like, at the very least, you guys could just tank. Let's get to a really high prospect. I could fully see this team limping to 6 wins and us not be able to get any of the good guys. So all we're left with is all this drama and our ownership, our leadership of this team being so in flux, and that's not even getting a good prospect out of it. Like, that's like a really horrible situation to be in as a fan, to go, hey, I know we're stuck in purgatory here, but, like, I need it to go one way or the other. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you're not in purgatory. You suck. So, like, right now, I look at the Seattle Seahawks yesterday with Geno Smith as their quarterback, knowing that they're probably going to make the playoffs and have no chance of winning an NFC playoff game. Like, they're not going to beat Detroit. So I look at that, and I'm like, you know, they're stuck. Like, they're going to be picking 23rd. They've got Geno signed to some real money, not starter money, but, like, some real money. But where are they getting a better quarterback to go with these freaking stud receivers? And Smith and Jigba is a dog. If you watched the game last night, thank you for calling, Adam. Smith and Jigba is a dog. They're in purgatory. The Saints are in purgatory. You're not. You stink. Now, as far as the feeling like the team is in flux, I believe, again, like a doctor trying to diagnose Adam's feelings towards the Titans, I believe that Adam is speaking of the anxiety about the people that are in charge of this football team, and it absolutely starts at the top. I had the exact same anxiety. The last year, the 2015 season, they fired Wisenhunt in the middle of the year, which I was thankful for. They made Mike Mularkey the interim head coach, and Mike really did steady the ship, even though they lost a lot of games. I mean, that team was so bad. They had Antonio Andrews at running back. Like, they were horrible. And so Mularkey, at least, got them through the season. But I had a lot of anxiety about, is Steve Underwood and Amy Adams Strunk, who had never spoken to the media, are these people going to get this right? And they hired John Robinson. And immediately I felt better, if for no other reason, because Floyd had given me not just on the air, but off the air, his full recommendation. I mean, he gave me the Fred McGriff, Tommy Mansky endorsement on John Robinson. And immediately, John and Mike came in and made changes that overnight, they were the common sense changes that this team never wanted to make. They got rid of Michael Griffin, who sucked. They traded in the 4th round. They swapped spots for DeMarco Murray. It was like, okay, these dudes got a plan. And so immediately that anxiety kind of went away, and it became optimism about where this thing was headed. I understand the anxiety because now people are trying to parse what Rand did or what Mike did. And again, they were not hired to be judged separately. They were hired to be judged together. The idea of a commission where one guy is not in charge, but 2 guys work together like a marriage never works in the NFL. It is not, this is not Tech Schramm and Tom Landry we're talking about here. It's a different era of football. So when you guys say, well, you want to fire Rand after 1 year, it's not firing Rand. It's not saying, you know what, Rand, come in the office, you're doing a horrible job, you're fired. It is this structure is ridiculous. It's got to go. It doesn't make any sense. And because I think that this structure is just off the walls bonkers, to take a head coach who has never worked in personnel before and say, okay, you've got an increased role in personnel, and to take a guy as a general manager or to hire him and to tell him like, hey man, we're going to make you the general manager, but we're not going to really give you the duties of the general manager job, to me is ridiculous. And so if I'm just firing Vrabel, but I keep Rand, now I've promoted Rand. What has Rand done that would make me think that he's worth a promotion? So to me, I'm just starting from scratch. But that's if it were my team. And if it were my team, we wouldn't be having the days of our lives drama that my team happens to be having right now. And I know it's easy to say if I own the team, I can promise you this. If I own the team, we wouldn't be David Tepper with the Carolina Panthers. So it's not, again, I understand the feelings you're talking about. I have them too. But it's about the structure as much as it is anything else. 615-737-1025. TD has been teasing an article that he's got coming out at ESPN.com. And I am actually fascinated to read it. And there is one specific thing that I am going to say that I will do. I promise I will do before this article comes out that I want you guys to do the same. We'll get to that coming up next. Fireball Whiskey. Nothing makes Fireball Hot Take Friday so special like ice cold Fireball cinnamon whiskey. Why? Because Fireball Whiskey goes down so smooth and it tastes so great. There is no better way to ignite the night and to enjoy it than to do so with Fireball cinnamon whiskey. It's starting to get cold. It means holiday parties are coming up. Don't be the guy who has the holiday party with no Fireball Whiskey. That's right. You want to make sure you've got Fireball cinnamon whiskey. Ignite the night. Please do it responsibly and be 21 years or older to enjoy. That's Fireball cinnamon whiskey.
I've been told is that Mike Vrabel is going forward. That is who they want to be the head coach, and they want that Vrabel and Rand Carthon relationship to be the one that leads this organization. So that is the case. Now, we know there's 6 games left. Things could change. We know that reactionary things happen, but from what I've been told, there's no intention of having that split apart.
TD on the show yesterday during the TD Power Hour. TD has a story that is coming out. I believe it was supposed to come out today. Then ESPN pushed it back to Saturday. Then ESPN has pushed it back to Tuesday, which actually I kind of like a little bit because it'll allow us to react to the Colts game on Monday, and then we'll get this TD story on Tuesday. And apparently it is a story about the relationship of Mike Vrabel and Rand Carthon. And as TD said today on Robbie and Joe, that these guys, we can assume whatever we want to assume, but as TD said, these guys looked me in the face and they said whatever it is that they said. I don't know what it's going to say. I mean, again, I do feel like, TD's made the gist of the story somewhat clear, that there's not a problem between Vrabel and Carthon. And I am fascinated to see what the actual quotes are before I have any opinion. And this is the promise that I want us all to make. And I am willing to make this promise because I can see people taking this article one of two ways. Even right now, knowing that this story is coming out from TD, I can see people taking this one of two ways. And this includes me. And this is why I'm saying right now, like I'm not going to do this. The idea of, oh, well, of course Rand and Mike are going to side with each other publicly. What do you think they're going to sit there and say, yeah, TD, we hate each other? Or there's a, hey, you see what they said in the TD article? It's all good. Whatever it may be. I don't know. I am going to wait until I see the quotes, until I read the story. Once we read the story, then we're allowed to have our opinions, whatever they may be. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you what I think of TD's story before I read TD's story. And I want all of you to feel the same way. And I'm just going to say, a lot of you texted into the text line yesterday when TD was talking to all of the scouts that he talked with at the Combine, when he was talking about, John Lynch, a conversation they had about all of the good things that Rand Carthon did in San Francisco, and people were texting in and they were saying, well, I mean, of course, TD, John Lynch is going to only say good things. And to that, I would tell you that in my experience, whenever, something happens and you don't really see it that way, you're gonna, be, ooh, yeah, I really, this would be one. Tell me about Rand Carthon. I'm John Lynch. Tell me about Rand Carthon. The Titans hired him. What do you think? I'm really happy for Rand. I'm really happy for him. He is a good guy. He's got a great family. I'm just so happy for him. That is code word for meh. And we've all been there. TD's old enough to know that, too. He's done that. So I guarantee you that's not what John Lynch told him. But again, people were already prejudging, like, oh, of course it's going to be. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to read it. And when I read it, then I will have an opinion of it. And I don't know what the opinion's going to be. And Ian, you want to know why I have no idea what the opinion is going to be?
Because you haven't read it?
Because I haven't read it yet. So that I just want everybody out there to promise that you'll do the same. Boy, I tell you, I bet this thing's going to be freaking juicy, though. I mean, I'm excited. There's a part of me that's like, ESPN, hurry it up. TD worked hard on that. But again, we'll have it Tuesday. 615-737-1025 on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. Cam has been waiting patiently and is up next on the program. What's up, Cam?
Hey, so my question is, if we're not going to re-sign Derek, to me, I can't get past it because Derek has. My thing is, don't you think we should try to solidify the line? And because what if Derek goes to another team and it goes back to the same theory of other players, our players leave and go to other teams and they're successful? Like he has a second wind And, I mean, I'm a diehard Alabama fan. I've watched him since he was in college, and I just don't think – I mean, y'all say that he's lost half a step, and I'm just not I think the offensive line is just garbage.
I think two
garbage.
things can be true there. I agree with the line, and I disagree with Derek. Now, I mean, I think there are a couple where I watch a tape, and I'm like, man, 2 years ago, that's a house call. And it's okay. Like, we all get older. I'm starting to get the Jewish man bald spot up top. I know I'm incredibly handsome. Thank you for your call, Cam. I know I'm incredibly handsome, and I wish that I didn't have it, but it happens. And with Derek, I mean, again, there's a couple where, the hole's there, and he just doesn't shoot through it the way that, again, he used to. And it's okay. It happens. I believe the Titans need to bring Derrick Henry back. I believe that Derrick Henry is really, really important to, like, a foundational piece to building the next era of Titan football. That the next time the Titans are good again, Derrick's not going to be on the football team, but the lessons that guys who are on the team, when they're good again, have learned from Derrick Henry will be incredibly important. Just like how, for this era of Titan football where you've been good, Delaney Walker, for the most part, wasn't on the team, and DeMarco Murray wasn't on the team. But I think those guys were incredibly important to that era of football. I think Derrick Henry is going to be very important to the next era of football. I also think Derrick Henry is still really good. He's not as good as he used to be, but he's still really good, and I don't think you get better by getting rid of good players. And I'm not sure there's going to be much of a market for Derrick, so if you give him a deal that is respectable, that he can sign and say, okay, I can do this. This is respectable to me. And you're up front with him about, hey, we want you back because you're a great player and we're going to give you the football. But also, like, we need you to exude every ounce of what makes you Derrick Henry like you already do every day. But I do think they need to keep Derrick Henry. They do need to fix the offensive line. I think what you guys, though, every time we talk about this, it's like, well, what are they going to go get? Who are they going to go find? What are they going to go? You guys think like, oh, no, they have got to get a superstar at all 5 positions. And I don't believe that. Skoronski, and I am not happy with his performance this year and how inconsistent it has been. And I certainly do not like the value of the position with the draft choice they used. Skoronski will be starting on the offensive line next year and should be starting on the offensive line next year. Brunskill, you can make an argument for, and I would be willing to listen. Everybody else has to go. You need a starting right tackle, you need a starting left tackle, and you need a starting center. That doesn't mean that you need a Pro Bowl left tackle or a Pro Bowl right tackle, but you do need starting players. And that means that you'll probably have to overpay. Or you'll have to take somebody that somebody doesn't want. But they've been a backup, but let's see. We're not doing that this year. You can't do that. You have to get a starter. A starting player, period. 615-737-1025 is the phone number. We'll get back into your phones. 615-737-1025 here on the Stillman and Company program. Again, on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. 615-737-1025. And I do think for young Mr. Will Levis, I do think that this game should have some serious juice. We'll get to that next. Here on a Fireball Hot Take Friday, again, our phone number is 615-737-1025. And let me tell all the fine folks out there to tune into 94.9 The Fan tomorrow for Vanderbilt basketball. The Commodores will take on Alabama A&M tomorrow at Memorial Gym. Tip-off is at 4 o'clock. Pre-game is at 3:30. And again, that is right here, I assume. This is 94.9 The Fan for Vanderbilt men's basketball tomorrow because the Preds will be on 102.5.
This spot where they selected, that was one that you were really projected to go to. Do you remember like some of the meetings and things that you had with the Colts and how that went?
Yeah, I thought they went well, and I thought there was definitely a shot that I would be going there. And I think kind of right up until that draft day, like both Anthony and I were kind of like, who's it going to be? Like we don't know. And it was I thought that it was a good chance, but obviously it didn't work out, and luckily ended up here.
That was Will Levis talking about, hey, you remember those meetings with the Colts and everything else? And what did you, Levis? Yeah, I really got to know them pretty well, and but it didn't work out. And so instead of making, I want to say that like the difference in the amount of money that Will Levis was going to make if he was drafted 4 compared to being drafted 33, I mean, I want to say it's like a difference of $20 million. Like, I mean, it was a lot of money. And obviously the draft night that ensued for him and the ego bruise that he had that night and everything else. Now, I've talked about the guys who are absolute dogs. Brady, Jordan, Marino, Aaron Rodgers. Those guys take disrespect and disappointment, and they metabolize it into greatness. I even think Joe Burrow uses his failures at Ohio State as something that has continued to motivate him. In fact, I'll tell you this right now. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this or not, but I'll do it anyways. Jordan Rodgers came up to me. The 2019 SEC Media Days, this was when LSU was just considered a good SEC team. Burrow had a good year in 2018, but not a great year, and nobody thought that LSU was going to be one of the greatest college teams of all time. And the SEC Media Days, when they are held in Birmingham, are held in a hotel that is connected to a shopping mall. And I remember I was in the shopping mall walking around with Jordan Rodgers, and he told me that Joe Burrow at the Manning Passing Academy was giving him the coldest shoulder. And that he'd said to Jake Fromm, he goes, why is Joe Burrow mad at me? And again, this is when Joe Burrow is just the starting quarterback at LSU, the way Will Rogers was the starting quarterback at Mississippi State. And Jake Fromm told Jordan that, oh, yeah, dude, he hates you. And he's like, what did I do? And apparently Jordan had said something during a TV broadcast or criticized Burrow in some way that Burrow just decided he hated Jordan. Now, they've since then patched those things up. But that's just the kind of dog that Joe Burrow is. And I think Will Levis has some serious dog in him. And again, when it comes to quarterback, I mean, this guy, there's so many different places he could end up. But what you ultimately want, what I ultimately want, is we want him to develop into an elite quarterback. We don't want him to be one of 32. We don't want him to be Jared Goff. If he becomes Jared Goff, he's not a bust. But we want him to be Joe Burrow or Patrick Mahomes. That's what we want. You got to have that dog in you. And this is the first week. I mean, I know Carolina decided to take Bryce Young, but this is the first week where I really think Levis can look at a team and say this is personal. Because Indianapolis used Will Levis in order to hide their feelings towards Anthony Richardson. In fact, I was listening to the press conferences this morning just to try to remember what everybody in Indy was saying at the time. And Jim Irsay held a press conference after the draft because, of course he did. Jim Irsay held a press conference after the draft, and he was talking about, well, we just always liked Anthony, and I called him 3 hours before the draft, and I told him, I said, you can't tell anybody I'm calling you, but there's a pretty good chance. I hope to be calling you later. And you heard Levis in that cut saying, I don't know when he and Richardson were looking at each other. You know, was it the day before the draft? Was it the day of the draft? Was it at the draft? Where he's like, Anthony Richardson and I were looking at each other like, it's going to be one of us. I mean, I don't know who's going to Indy here. And the old man, I mean, they knew. Oh, we're going to take Anthony Richardson. I called him 3 hours before the draft. But then I also went back to what was being said, because I remember it so specifically. It was a topic that I talked about a lot, both here and on Sirius, which was, and some of this was me projecting my feelings of Anthony Richardson onto maybe Indianapolis, but I just kept reading every report about how much the Colts liked Will Levis. And I'm like, if everybody is convinced the Colts like Will Levis, that's all because they want you to think that they like Will Levis. when they really don't like Will Levis. They like somebody else. And I liked Levis, but I didn't like Levis like I liked Richardson. And I'll tell you right now, the amount of love that I had for Anthony Richardson, you would have never known it if I was a team and I was wanting to hide in the weeds to pick him. You would never have known it. And what do you do to do that? You tell someone, hey, boy, I'll tell you, we love this kid right here. I remember at the Senior Bowl 2 years ago, Mike Tomlin was following Malik Willis around like a dog sniffing another dog's butt. That's how much he was following Malik Willis. Then before Malik's pro day, they went out to dinner, and it was, Pittsburgh loves Malik. Pittsburgh loves Malik. Pittsburgh loves Malik. Pittsburgh loves Malik. They took Kenny Pickett. Right after the draft was over, they asked Tomlin, were you considering any of the other quarterbacks? Tomlin, no. They knew they wanted Pickett the whole time, and they were just trying to find somebody else to say, hey, we might take this guy instead. This was the chatter from the insiders, Jeremy Fowler and Peter Schrager. This was the chatter about Indianapolis and Levis before the draft.
There is some buzz around the league about Will Levis and the Colts at number 4 overall. I texted with UK coach Mark Stoops, who told me that the Colts have done their homework on Levis, and they had a presence at his pro day. So he's a bit of a polarizing prospect because when you talk to teams, they say he's a pretty serious guy as far as his demeanor. How's he going to fit in with certain teams? But the ability is certainly there. I've talked to several teams now who think the Colts are at least seriously considering taking Levis in that spot, and he fits the prototype for what they've always liked.
I think Bryce Young's the first quarterback. Will Levis could very easily be the second quarterback. I've heard he's actually had great meetings with teams, and he's well liked by a lot of buildings. The connection with the Colts, there's no natural connection with saying, well, the offensive coordinator coached him here, and this guy likes him here. I just have heard from a lot of people around the league, mostly from people outside the Colts building, that they are hearing that there's a bunch of fans in that building, and it's been that way for quite some time.
I mean, in both cases, it's like, I hear the Colts love him. I hear he's having great meetings with teams, and these teams really like him. And then none of them drafted him. Atlanta didn't draft him. The Raiders didn't draft him. Indy didn't draft him. Houston didn't draft him. Tampa with Baker Mayfield didn't draft him. Washington didn't draft him. Hell, even Tennessee didn't draft him. They drafted a guard instead. So if Will Levis has that dog in him, that Joe Burrow, that Peyton Manning, that if he's got that I'm going to make you pay for disrespecting me. If he's got that in him, the Michael Jordan and I took that personally gene, this would be the first time for him to really put it on somebody. Because if there's any team that disrespected Levis or at least did what I would consider to be like, they used him. If there was any feeling that I had like that, I'd make you pay for it. I mean, I'd make you pay. And so when it comes to Levis against the Colts, I don't feel like this game has any juice for me. I mean, again, I'll watch it. I'll get triggered by it. You guys know how it is. But you win, you're not going to make the playoffs. You lose, you're not going to make the playoffs. There's just really not a lot at stake here. But if I was Levis, this game would have plenty of juice to me because of how they treated me. 615-737-1025 is our phone number here, 615-737-1025. Speaking of Levis and all the teams that passed on him, there's one last night that I sat there and I thought, does this team regret not having Will Levis? We'll touch on that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.